Upon returning to civilian life, a Marine War veteran finds himself grappling with the difficulties of readjustment. The transition proves to be mentally and emotionally challenging, and his frustrations mount as he encounters financial hardships. Determined to reclaim the money owed to him, he devises a plan to stage a fake bank robbery, hoping to draw attention to his predicament. Little does he know that this decision will set off a series of unexpected events, completely altering the course of his life. Hello, and welcome to IM Movies. Before we start the recap, the whole team of IM Movies wants to thank all 1,000 and plus subscribers. Thank you for putting the time to watch all of our video. Now, let's go back to the movie. The movie begins with two police officers dragging Brian out of a building. They uncuff him, return his belongings, and leave him sitting on the ground. A woman approaches him and gives him his glasses, noting that he has bruises on his face. The narrative then shifts to various random images, including a man feeding birds, boys skating, a man breakdancing, and another man playing the violin. The sequence ends with Brian smoking and making eye contact with a dog. Later in the evening, Brian walks by the road and plays a game with his daughter over the phone. However, his call ends due to lack of credit. He then goes to his room, freshens up, packs some belongings into a bag, and heads out. Brian enters a Wells Fargo bank and pauses to smoke in front of the building before going inside. As he steps in, he looks around, appears nervous, and searches for security cameras. A teller notices him and calls his attention.
I'll take you.
He approaches the teller named Rosa Diaz and asks to withdraw $25 from his account. Rosa engages in a friendly conversation with Brian, sharing a story about her daughter. She hands him the money. After their conversation, Brian passes a note to Rosa, saying, "I have a bomb." Rosa becomes scared, and Brian instructs her to trigger the alarm and call the police. Another woman in the bank notices Rosa's change in expression and warns customers to leave while stopping others from entering. Brian notices her actions and approaches her, asking who is in charge. She identifies herself as the manager named Estelle Valerie. Meanwhile, Rosa struggles to connect with emergency services. Brian jumps over the counter and speaks directly to the 911 operator, introducing himself and stating that he has a bomb. He threatens to harm everyone in the bank, including himself, if his demands are not met.
Basically, I'm gonna kill myself and everybody in here.
His demand is the return of a disability check that was stolen from him. The 911 operator asks about Brian's appearance, and he states that he is black but not affiliated with any group. The operator requests that Brian allow the employees to leave, but he refuses, asserting that as long as everyone remains calm, no one will be harmed. Brian becomes paranoid and asks if a sniper is watching him. He disconnects security cameras and closes the blinds, hiding behind a bench. Brian then shouts to Estelle, the manager, to gather the fire trucks and news reporters.
I need the fire trucks. I need the news cameras.
He claims that people think he is playing, but he is serious. He asks Estelle and Rosa to contact news networks and arrange their presence at the bank. Brian requests the lights to be turned off and asks for a negotiator. He apologizes to Rosa for involving her in this situation. Brian runs around the office, talks to the 911 operator again, and asks Rosa to stand in front of him as a shield. He engages in a random conversation with Rosa, asking about her interests. He then asks Estelle about previous robberies, and she confirms that they have happened before. Brian asks if the previous robber was killed, and Estelle tells him that he was arrested but not killed. Brian replies saying he had to be white.
He got to be white.
Brian asks Estelle to contact the news network and then tells Rosa that he wants to make a call to his people to update them on the situation. However, his calls go to voicemail. At one point, a customer calls looking for Bridget about her 401k, and Brian takes the call politely, pretending to be a customer service representative. This surprises the women in the bank. Outside the bank, armed officers position themselves, preparing for potential intervention. Brian hides behind the counter, and Rosa informs him that she can get him the money he needs, which is within reach. However, Brian clarifies that he does not want the bank's money. He only wants the cash that was taken from him. While Brian talking, there is a loud bang, causing Brian to instinctively fall on top of Rosa, mistaking it for a gunshot. However, it turns out to be an employee trying to enter the room. Estelle yells at the employee to leave, and he complies while Brian apologizes to Rosa for falling on her. Brian returns to the phone and expresses his frustration about not having a negotiator yet. Growing impatient, he takes out the bomb from his bag, holds it in his hand, and raises his hand in the air. Estelle pleads with him not to detonate the bomb, stating that they have kids. Brian continues shouting on the phone that all he wants is a negotiator.
Where's my negotiator? Please, ma'am.
But he is put on hold repeatedly. In his frustration, he drops the phone and apologizes again before suggesting that they use the restroom. Estelle agrees and goes to the restroom, but instead of using it, she texts Rosa, informing her that they need to leave and that she will try to unlock the door. After some time, Brian instructs Rosa to check on Estelle in the bathroom and make sure everything is fine. Brian finally connects with the negotiator, and he keeps saying that he only wants his money. The negotiator tries to convince Brian to come out, but Brian refuses. During their conversation, they notice a news truck arriving outside. Brian instructs Estelle to turn on the TV. Brian threatens that he will blow up the bank if his demands are not met, but just before dropping the phone, he asks to be connected to his daughter. He hasn't been able to reach her, and he wants to speak with her. After ending the call, he asks Rosa about her thoughts on the conversation, and she nods with fear. Meanwhile, at his wife's house, Brian's daughter, Kaya, enters her mother's room and answers the ringing phone. She tells her mom that someone wants to talk to her. Brian tells his wife that he might go to jail for a long time depending on the situation.
Depending on how everything works out, I might go to jail.
She responds lightly, thinking he's off his medication. He then explains the situation to his daughter and promises to get her a puppy once he resolves it. Kaya hangs up the phone after hearing this. Brian drops the phone and looks at Rosa, assuring her that if he dies, he will die alone. He suddenly hears a helicopter, which briefly triggers memories of his military days before returning to the present. The customer who called earlier, Bridget, calls again, and Brian responds rudely, informing her that he is currently robbing the bank. Estelle engages in a conversation with Brian, sharing her own story of empathy and understanding his predicament. She tells him that her ex-husband faced the same issues. Brian becomes slightly paranoid, questioning her intentions and whether she considers him slow. Estelle reassures him, explaining that her concern stems from fear. Outside, an officer named Bernard is getting prepared and briefed outside the bank. Meanwhile, Brian places a call to WSB, a news station, and tips them off about the ongoing hostage situation. The news crew sets up a camera and starts interviewing Brian, asking for personal information, such as his social security number. Brian becomes suspicious and refuses to provide it. The police, including Officer Bernard, are patched onto the call, questioning why the suspect is speaking to a reporter. Brian shares his story with a reporter named Lisa. Brian begins by recounting his experience in the Marines, mentioning his honorable discharge. Lisa asks about the VA, prompting a switch in scenes where Brian flashes back to his interaction with the VA office. He recalls seeking his disability check and being handed a flyer for people facing food and housing insecurity. Frustrated, he leaves the office without joining the long queue outside. Returning to the phone call, Brian asserts that he is not a psychopath.
I'm not a psychopath.
And pleads with Lisa to make the interview live. However, Lisa informs him that they cannot allow his actions to be broadcasted, considering the safety of their children. Meanwhile, outside the bank, military personnel and law enforcement agents are taking positions and setting up equipment. Meanwhile, at Brian's house, agents break into his room to search for evidence, but they find nothing. Brian then reveals that his brother has put a hit on him for a sum of $20,000, expressing his disappointment and questioning his brother's betrayal. Rosa texts Estelle, expressing fear and concern for their lives. Brian continues to insist on being in front of a camera, emphasizing the significance he attaches to the attention it would bring. However, Bernard, a police officer, advises the reporters to stay away from the bank and tries to prevent them from setting up cameras. Lissette asks Bernard to go to a window, but he refuses, suggesting the use of a long lens instead.
A long lens and zoom in that you can see me with.
Inside the bank, Estelle types a goodbye message to her son, believing that she might not survive the ordeal. Bernard drives away in a car while Brian grows increasingly frustrated by the lack of attention he is receiving. He pulls a beeping device from his bag, capturing the reporter's attention. But when he learns that a negotiator wants to talk to him, he switches off the device, apologizes to the woman again, and walks away. A scene shift shows Kaya, Brian's daughter, approaching her mother as they watch the news. Kaya recognizes her father's face and playfully calls out to him, creating a moment of comfort between her and her mother. At the same time, the woman from the VA's office watches the news and reacts with shock. Returning to the bank, Brian receives a call from Bernard, who empathizes with him. Brian expresses his desire to retrieve his money, and they share a moment of camaraderie as they were both Marines. Brian humorously recalls a Marine-related incident, and they laugh together. Bernard tells Brian that his responsibility is to ensure Brian leaves the bank alive, but Brian is convinced of his imminent death.
We all die at our appointed time.
Another flashback occurs, taking us back to Brian's encounter with law enforcement at the VA's office, where he was forcefully restrained. Brian claims that everything has been taken from him, stating that the VA owes him $892.34. Bernard seems surprised by the low amount and reassures Brian that he is worth more than that, but Brian insists that he is worth nothing. Brian expresses his belief that he will die tonight and that nobody will care. While still on the call, the major enters the car and instructs Bernard to move back to the truck. Bernard complies, stepping out of the car, and assures Brian that he will call Cassandra. He also requests that Brian release one of the women. Brian asks about the money, and Bernard, emphasizing his integrity as a Marine, promises that if he lets one of the women go, they will sort out the financial matter.
You let one of them go and we will sort this out.
However, Brian, who is typically paranoid, refuses, fearing that if he opens the door, the military personnel outside will attack him. They end the call, and Bernard reprimands the major for interrupting him, but adds serve to show respect. Bernard calls Cassandra, and they engage in a video call. Bernard asks whether Brian has ever been violent, and Cassandra says no. She asks why FBI agents are on their way to her house, and Bernard dismisses it as a routine procedure. He advises her to contact him if the agents do anything she disapproves of. As they end the call, Cassandra tells Bernard to inform Brian that Kaya says he should not do anything stupid.
Kaya says, don't do nothing stupid.
However, before she can relay the message, Brian attempts to call Cassandra again. The FBI agents at Cassandra's house prevent her from answering the call. Shortly after, Bernard calls Brian back and requests to speak with one of the women. Rosa receives the phone but is too scared to speak, so Estelle takes over and loudly expresses their distress. Bernard instructs her to stay calm and returns the phone to Brian. Bernard asks if there's anything Brian would like, and Brian requests some cigarettes. Bernard assures him that he will get them and ends the call. Estelle tries to intervene by offering to deposit the money directly into Brian's account, but Brian insists that this is not what he wants.
That's not what I need to happen.
He believes that if he cared only about the money, he would have requested it upon entering the bank. Estelle, tearful and desperate, begs him to let her deposit the money so she can face her son and tell him that she did her best to save Brian's life. Her plea gets to Brian, who sheds a tear and instructs her to call his daughter. Bernard, concerned that revealing the money's source might trigger Brian, advises the person speaking to Estelle to stop and suggests disabling all bank communications except the phones, and the major promptly issue the order. Bernard calls Brain and tells him he's on CNN.
Look at your phone, man. You're on CNN.
Estelle confirms it by showing him from her phone. Bernard tells him that he now has the VA where he wants them. Brian hangs up the phone and asks one of the ladies to go. Meanwhile, Lisa from WBS meets with the woman from the VA's office, who shows her Brian's file. Their conversation reveals that the system is designed to exploit individuals like Brian, taking money from them by any means necessary. Bernard goes to buy the pack of cigarettes and prepares for the exchange. Inside the bank, the women cannot decide who should be released, as they refuse to leave each other behind. Brian decides that Rosa should leave, believing it's better to keep a senior manager with him. He provides instructions for the exchange and heads to the bathroom, where he calls his daughter. Tearfully, Brian assures his daughter that he will be okay and encourages her to pray with him. He tearfully reads a prayer from Psalm in the Bible. His daughter, Kaya, advises him to breathe. Brian tells her to always treat people well and always do right by them. He tells her that he would now let the women out. However, Kaya only expresses concern about her puppy.
Then we gonna get my puppy?
Meanwhile, Estelle attempts to escape but finds herself unable to leave without Rosa. Brian returns and discovers Estelle's failed attempt, causing her to be angry with Rosa for not going with her. Outside, the officials are getting closer to the bank's entrance. Brian expresses gratitude to the woman, apologizes to them once again, and while still speaking, a sniper takes a shot. Bernard is devastated, while the other officers proceed into the building. At Cassandra's house, the FBI agents receive a call and abruptly leave without answering Cassandra's question about Brian's fate. Bernard attempts to call Cassandra, but she doesn't answer because she is outside her house with Kaya. Meanwhile, a robot navigates through the bank and retrieves the bag from Brian's lifeless body. Bernard enters the bank, squats over Brian's body with a pack of cigarettes in his hand, and notices a small cross pendant that belonged to Brian. Upon entering the bank, Bernard's partner informs him that there was never a bomb.
There's no bomb.
Brian's intention was never to blow up the bank. He simply wanted the money that was owed to him. The scene shifts, and we now see Estelle and Rosa reunited with their families. It has been an incredibly intense day for these women. Meanwhile, Bernard returns home, holding the pack of cigarettes and the cross pendant, and places the cross on his shelf. The story concludes with a scene where Brian is talking to his daughter. He carries her in his thoughts, emphasizing the emotional bond between them. This story is based on true events. On a final note, it is revealed that despite everything that transpired, Brian's family has still not received the payments owed to them by the VA. Ultimately, this story reminds us how war can deeply affect people and their lives after it's over. It shows that veterans need support and understanding as they adjust to civilian life again. And that's the end of this recap. Thanks for watching, and see you at the next one.